So the interviewer will ask you to design this scalable poll widget that looks something like this. And trust me, this is honestly one of the most asked front-end system design question out there. So over here, we can see we have a title or a question, you can say, and we have a bunch of different options. We cannot see the result over here. So this is normally how a poll widget works, right? And when we select any option over here, then you can see the result, all of the votes that has been casted on that particular option and the percentage of the votes. And also we have the option to remove the vote, or we can, select any other option and you can see the result is being updated in real time. Now I know a lot of you might be thinking that this is such a simple question, but trust me, there are a lot of hidden things that we often overlook while doing a question like this. Like for example, ability to customize a single or multiple selection poll. So this is our poll widget component, right? If I say is multiple over here, now you're gonna notice. Now we can select multiple different options over here, right? Ability to scale this component by providing a lot of such options so that we can customize the component from outside. Adding the accessibility features like ARIA tags, keyboard navigation, and making it embeddable in other websites, and much more. So we will discuss all of this along with the requirements, high-level design, the low-level design, the API structure, and then the optimizations. So the first step is requirement gathering. And basically this part involves you discussing with the interviewer on what the functional or non-functional requirements could be for this particular problem, right? So the functional requirements are generally those which are absolutely required and are on the first priority for designing a component like a poll widget, right? And non-functional requirements are the requirements that are good to have, basically, right? Like for example, adding the accessibility or performance improvement, etc. So okay, let's discuss the functional requirements first. So obviously the very first requirement is to be able to vote or remove the vote from the poll, right? That's pretty much self-explanatory. Second thing that I mentioned, ability to add the multiple votes, right? So a lot of time in these interviews, when we hear something like a poll widget, we would think that, okay, we would require to vote only one time, right? But that is not the case. You have to consider multiple different things. Like for example, if someone is asking their audience that what topic they need to create content next, they might be looking for a multiple suggestions from their audience, right? So in that case, multiple vote support will be great. Then comes vote persistence. Vote persistence basically means I'm going to be persisting the votes in the local storage so that whenever I reload my application again, it can take the old data from there and probably if needed, it can fetch the new data according to the logic. Then we have to make it embeddable. We will discuss what would be the best to make this component embeddable. Will it be hosting it on a CDN or publishing it to an npm repository so that we can install it by using something like npm install, etc. We will make it customizable. So basically customizable here means that the ability to supply the styles from outside the component, right? We don't want to touch whatever's inside the component. So let me show you. If we have this poll widget over here, right? If I go on over here, press enter, control space, you can see we have this option for styles. And inside of this styles, if I go inside of it, you're going to see it gives us all of these suggestions that we can customize the container, option input, option label, option container, option votes, progress bar, what color we can add the fill to the progress bar, remove button title, so many options over here, right? A lot of times you won't be able to think of all of these options, right? That is why I mentioned a component like this is very important because it involves much more than just creating the UI, right? So we can customize the styles through these props from outside, right? This is very important. And also adding a loading indicator. This loading indicator can be, something like a skeleton of loader. Like for example, if I show you, when this loads for the very first time, it shows this skeleton loader over here, right? So this adds to the UI, it adds to the experience of the user when they're using a component like this. So all of these fall under functional requirements. And if you answer all of these correctly in your interviews, trust me, your interviewer will be truly impressed, right? So let's discuss the non-functional requirements now. So the non-functional requirements, the very first step that we think of is performance, right? We have to consider the performance. And I'll show you what are all the techniques that you can use to improve a performance of a widget like this. Responsiveness, obviously it should be able to run on all of the devices, like on mobile devices, tablet, desktop. It should be responsive, right? Scalability, again, same thing. We should be able to supply the props from outside. We should be able to make it scalable, right? Like for example, on vote, what happens on vote? What happens on vote remove? I've added this logic. I'm supplying this logic from outside instead of just writing this logic inside, right? Because probably if we are creating any application on vote, we want to trigger some other action inside of our application. Right now, this component don't know what that action is. So that's why we need options like on vote, on remove, or probably, on vote change, something like that, right? So all of these things make our components scalable. Accessibility. So basically accessibility means the ability to make our component or our app more accessible to specially abled people, right? Like for example, people who are completely reliant on keyboard navigation, or probably people who are not able to see properly, who have less vision, and they are dependent on something like screen readers, right? So that is why we need to improve the accessibility using correct semantic tags, and we will discuss this in this video as well. And compatibility, right? It should be able to run on all of the browsers. It should be fully compatible, right? So these are the major requirements that we need to fulfill while designing a component such as a poll widget. By the way, this video is divided into two parts. In this first part, we will be discussing the complete front-end system design of this poll widget, and in the second part, we will go on and create this poll widget from absolute scratch inside of our VS Code. So let's see the high-level design of this component. So basically, high-level design means that we are not going inside the technical side of things right now. We are just defining the flow and how our component could look like, the things that our component will contain. So that is why it is called high-level design, right? Not deep, like diving deep into the technicalities and stuff. So it would look something like this, right? We have a poll widget, which obviously going to have a title and the options. Just like I showed you over here, right? We have the title and the options over here. In the options, we have the ability to vote. Now, vote can be of two types. It can be it can support multiple votes or single vote, right? Depending on the type of props that we have provided to our component. And then after voting, we have the ability to remove the vote by clicking this remove vote button over here, right? And after we have voted, we also have the ability to see the number of votes casted and the percentage of each and every vote. So we will show the percentage result. You can probably add this after this flow as well, but this is fine as well, right? So this is a very high level architecture of how our components flow will look like. But now let's deep dive into the low level design of our component, where we will discuss how our data will look like, what is the data going to be inside of our component, and also the props that our poll component will take. But before that, I would like to address one thing. Like, a lot of you people message me to ask like, what's the best resource for learning React or frontend in general. So this is the resource that I refer to, and you can see they have the Frontend Developer Career Path course, and this is made in partnership with the MDN. That is a big deal, right? So if you open this course, they start with the web dev basics. They also teach you CSS in depth, everything related to JavaScript, responsive design, working with APIs, and then move on to React basics and even advanced React. And the best part, they have a completely dedicated chapter, or you can say section, on getting hired as well, right? Like using LinkedIn to get a job, etc. So this is amazing. Like, this is a complete package if you're someone who is just starting out, or even with some intermediate knowledge and looking to become really good in front-end development. This is the course that I would recommend you. So this platform is called as Scrimba. And I actually reached out to these guys to collaborate for this video, and they were kind enough to give me a 30% off discount for you guys. And the best part about Scrimba is their interactive video tutorials. Like, if I show you, so you can see over here that instructor is teaching about form actions over here, and you can see we have zoomed out of the video and gotten right inside of the code. So we don't ever have to leave our website and we can directly jump right into the code. We don't have to open VS Code or whatever, right? So definitely click the link in the description down below and avail this 30% off, which is only valid for next 2 weeks, right? So don't miss out on this offer. Let's get back to our video. So first of all, when it comes to the actual object or the data of our poll, right? What are all the things that we're going to be having? So let's say if I create an interface poll, right? So this can obviously have an ID of type number. It can have a question or a title, right, related to the poll, which will be a string. It can have a total count of the votes casted, which is going to be a number, and the options, right? So options, and it will be of like, it will be basically an object, right? An array of objects. So I'll just say option over here and create an array. So let's create this option interface and see what are all the things that we're going to have inside of it. So I'll say interface option, and this is going to be very simple. It's going to have a title and the number of votes inside of this option, right? So first of all, I'll have an ID, which is going to be a number, the title of that option string, and the number of votes on that particular option. So this will be a number as well, right? Simple enough. But now when it comes to our actual poll component, what are all the things that this is going to be taking? So when it comes to the data, we don't know what type of data the user will be supplying us, right? So we have to make sure that we provide everything to the user so that they can provide everything one by one. Like for example, title, the number of options, if it supports multiple votes or not, right? So let's say interface poll props. And first thing is going to be the poll ID. So this poll ID right here, this will help us to make the API calls, right? Like for example, if there are multiple different polls, this will help us to uniquely identify that particular poll when we are making a API call. And also this poll ID will help us to store the data or persist our data in local storage through this unique ID, right? So we can recover it later on. So I'll say number. Poll ID will be a number. Then we will have a title, just like we've discussed, which will be a string. We will have the options, which will be of type option, right? Option like array of the option. Then we will have is multiple, so that user can provide us information if the type of poll is single voting poll or multiple selection poll. So this obviously is going to be Boolean. Then to make it scalable, we will have on vote and on vote remove. So for on vote, whenever user casts a new vote, we will use this poll ID and the number of options that the user has selected, and we will take that data from this component and make our API call, right? So this is going to be a function which is going to be returning us a promise, right? Promise of options, and actually option, not options. And as I mentioned, this will take a poll ID, which will be a number, and the selected options, which is going to be an array of number. So we are not just going to be sending the whole options object, then selected options object. We are just going to be sending the ID of all of those options. So this will be much helpful for the user to make the API call, right? Now let me duplicate this on vote, and similar to this, we're going to have on vote remove option as well. This will again take the poll ID, the selected options, and will return us promise with the updated options, right? So that we can update it in our UI. Then we will have these styles, and this is going to be optional. Actually, this is multiple is also going to be optional. By default, we can take the is multiple value as false, right? So styles, and we can create a separate interface for this called poll styles. So let's create this poll styles as well. So over here, let me just say poll styles. By the way, all of this whiteboard stuff you can find from the link in the description down below. So let's just add the interface for poll styles. I'll say interface poll styles, and I've already showed you what these will contain, right? It will have the styles for container, title, options, container. Now this thing completely depends on you. Whatever that you want to keep for your, whatever you want user to customize inside of your component, you can keep all of those styles right over here. So I've put all of them over here so that you can pick and choose whatever you want to put as customizable inside of your component. So okay, that was a low level design. Now when we work on a particular task in an organization, we would, before starting that particular task, if it's dependent on backend APIs, we would have a particular contract discussion call with the backend team, right? So in that call, we would discuss what type of payload that we will be sending to the API and what type of response that you will be sending from the backend, right? So all of this is very important while designing a component or working on a feature. So that is what we will be discussing, the API structure. So first, the API that we will be having is the get API to get that particular poll, and I've put the endpoint over here as /API/poll and the particular ID. Now this won't have any payload, right? I mean, you can say the ID is a payload, right? But it's going along with the URL. But the response that this will be sending us is the object containing the details of the poll, right? So it can have the ID, question, total count, option, just like this poll data that we have discussed over here, right? You can also have an API like slash API slash polls, which will send you the array of object containing different polls, right? We will have another API called slash API slash vote. Now over here, inside the payload, we will be sending two things, right? Just like if you remember, we have discussed over here, we have an on vote prop over here, right? Which is sending the poll ID and selected options whenever a vote occurs. So that is exactly what we will be sending to the backend. The poll ID, let's say in this case it's 41, and the selected options, which in this case let's say is 83 and 84. Now it can be a single option or it can be a multiple option, right? Our app supports both of them. And in the response, we will get the options, the updated options, right? So which can look something like this. So this is basically an array and it can have multiple different objects over here. And each option, as I already discussed, will have this structure. So that's why I put this structure over here in the response. When it comes to slash API slash remove or remove vote, it's going to be exactly the same. So let me just copy and paste it over here. The options that we are going to be removing and the response that we will be getting from the backend, right? So these two APIs are kind of very similar. And these are the three major APIs that we will be using inside of our poll widget. All right, now comes the optimizations. So first thing first, that we have already discussed, that we should be persisting all the votes that are casted inside of our app, right? So let's just add this point over here. And if I show you this in our implementation, if I go to inspect, and so let's just refresh this, you can see it's still persistent. If I go on over here in the application, local storage, inside the local storage, we have this poll 41. So poll dash the ID of that poll. As I told you, we will be referring it with the help of the ID, and we can see the value is 83. That is selected. If I change it, you can see the value updates in real time. So this is the benefit of persisting our votes, right? And also over here, you can see I've implemented the API calls over here, which we will be discussing in our part 2 of this video, right? Now the next thing, to improve the performance of our component, we will be using transform instead of the width for the percentage. So over here, you can see this percentage here, right? So if I go on over here, you can see I've used transform scale. So this is actually more performant than using something like width. And I've explained to you in my progress bar video as well, right? So this is one of the performance optimization. We should show a loading indicator. I've already showed you, right, the skeleton. What if we have more than 4 options, right? Then we should make it scrollable. So let's say if I go to my data over here and let's try to duplicate this multiple times, you can see all of the options become scrollable now, right? So this is something that we have to take care of. Now this is the main thing. We should implement the accessibility, and actually let's just create a separate section for this accessibility. So what type of accessibility are we going to be implementing in this? So one of the first and the most obvious accessibility that we have to implement is correct semantic tags, right? So a lot of times when we build application, we would use random divs or span in different places, right? And that should not be the case. Like you can see in this poll widget over here, I've used this field set to contain all of our options and the title and this legend over here. So when we use a legend, you can see it will show up right over here as the title of the caption. And you can, know more details about legend tag. So the legend element represents the caption for that particular content. And you can see they've given this poll example over here as well. And you can see that we generally use field set to wrap around a component like this. And the field set HTML element is used to group several controls as well as labels within a single web form. So this is a better way of structuring our form, which uses something like a label and multiple different options, so that people with disabilities or people who rely on ARIA tags can use our app much more efficiently. Now the next thing that we can add is role tag, right? So if I go back to the code, you can see we have added role group over here. If it's a radio group, you can probably add a radio group role in a div like this. Like for example, this is the div that is wrapping all of our radio buttons, right? So you can probably add a optional logic over here. Like if this is not multiple selection widget, if is multiple is false, then you can show role equals radio group, right? All right, now the next thing is ARIA tags. So what are ARIA tags? If we go inside of this app, if we click on inspect, you can see we have these things like ARIA labeled by and for each app option we have described by, etc., right? So what are these all about? So if I go back to my code, so all of these ARIA tags have different roles, and basically ARIA tags are used for providing the additional details about that particular element. Like for in this case, we have this title, right? We have provided this an ID, and we have said that take the title for this particular field set. So okay, so let's suppose that someone is using a screen reader. So when they select this particular box over here, they want to know what this box is all about. So we should tell them this box is all about best YouTube channel to learn frontend, right? So I'm going to say ARIA labeled by, and it's going to be labeled by this particular title over here. So here, this box will have the text of this title, that is best YouTube channel to learn frontend. So how can you see this? Just click on this accessibility tag over here and enable full page accessibility tree and reload DevTools. Now you will see this icon over here, click on it. And now you can see for this particular group, we can see the title is best YouTube channel to learn frontend. Similarly, we can add multiple different ARIA tags as well. There are a lot of ARIA tags, and I've covered all of this in a separate lesson in my frontend interview preparation course, so you can check that out. So we have ARIA tags like, for example, ARIA checked, which is used in checkbox or radio buttons, or ARIA described by. It's similar to ARIA labeled by. It's described by what is written inside of this option, that is these many votes and this much percentage. So like, for example, ARIA described by, so this input is described by this particular option over here, that how many votes has been casted over here and all the percentage, etc., right? You can also either take this ID and put it over here, so that this is, defined by this particular option dot title. So now we can see inside the label text, if I select this radio button, this is described by this particular thing, and in the description we can see roadside coder, right? So these are some of the ARIA tags that you can use. Next thing when it comes to accessibility can be keyboard navigation. Now, since we're using correct semantic tags like radio button and all of those things over here, if I click on tab over here, you can see we can select the options just by using keyboard, the top and bottom arrow key, the up and down arrow key, right? And if I further click on tab, we can see we have selected remove vote, and if I click enter now, you can see the votes have been removed, right? So this is very important, keyboard navigation. Now in this is not very much rigorous keyboard navigation, but in a lot of other system design question, like for example, I've discussed the auto complete search box. In that, keyboard navigation was kind of a little bit tricky, right? So this is also very important. Now in the end, how will you make this component embeddable? So we can either use CDN, or we can publish our component on NPM, right? We can use either of these approaches. So now over here, since we are using React app, I'm gonna go with the approach of publishing as an NPM package instead of using CDN, because CDN is generally good enough for vanilla JS apps. But since I'm using React app over here, we can simply install it by using npm install whatever the name of our component is, right? And we will discuss how you can host this component on npm in the part 2 of this video. And that part 2, you can say it is more of a machine coding question, right? The system design question is this much itself, right? Even if you answer this much in your interviews, when they ask you to create a poll widget, you can easily pass that interview, right? But when it comes to machine coding, in the machine coding round, you go on and create the complete component from absolute scratch, right? So that component is part of my front-end interview preparation course. This is the only thing that you will ever need to prepare for your front-end interviews. And not only this, I've covered every single topic of React.js, like React Router DOM, Redux, all of the hooks, class-based component, function-based component React, even the performance optimization, which is asked from senior developers a lot, tons of machine coding questions as well, and obviously in-depth interview preparation course on JavaScript as well. And not just this, along with this course, you get an active Discord community where you can ask your doubts whenever you get stuck, and we will be there to help you. So click the link in the description down below, because right now we're having the biggest sale of the year for a very limited time. So don't forget to check it out. Or you can also scan this QR code on your screen to go directly to the course page.